Lost Generation. This one is going to be highly complex, but extremely important. It's going to be something that's very hard to define, but is one of the defining philosophical things in my life. To begin this, I need to read a quote from Marcus Aurelius. Let's begin. Human life, duration, momentary. Nature, changeable. Perception, dim. Condition of body, decaying. Soul, spinning around. Fortune, unpredictable. Lasting fame, uncertain. Sum up, the body and its parts are a river. The soul, a dream and mist. Life is warfare and a journey far from home. Lasting reputation is oblivion. Marcus Aurelius, The Meditations. Now, that quotation is going to be used to backdrop several videos that I'm going to do. But this particular video, I'm going to attempt to attack and describe the concept of self-mastery and or elemental mastery. And the one part of this quote in particular that this pertains to, in my opinion, is life is warfare and a journey far from home. What I take that to mean, personally, life is warfare. What we're talking about with that is the whole concept of self-mastery. It's a constant battle. It's a battle that never ends. But if you are coming out on top in that battle and you do have self-mastery, it's pretty hard to be unsuccessful. And, you know, you can even set your own definition of success. It's different for everyone. But if you don't have self-mastery, you're going to be a lost soul. And the lost soul usually only meets success by fortune, chance, or luck. You know, pretty much every person that's driven in some form has approached self-mastery. Most of the people you see that are in bad positions and can't figure out why, those are the people that have not even begun to master their self. The journey far from home, what I take that to mean is the interfacing of the self into, you know, the public, into the world. That is the journey far from home, because you're taking yourself into conditions which are outside the norm and interfacing in that journey. So you're not even cognizant of the journey far from home if you haven't won the battle. And trust me, it is a battle. You know, I can give you a little bit of history on me, but when I was about 10 years old, I was just overcame with crushing depression, absolutely crushing. And I thought that it was me who was to blame. I thought something was wrong with myself. And in trying to self-medicate and live fast, I was trying to basically numb that out and, you know, just skip by it. But what I realized through years of trial and, you know, misery was that it wasn't in fact me, it was the conditions that existed around me. And what I mean is I've always had some core of spirituality, but most of the world we interface with is lost. And it was a major problem for me. And I almost lost my life, almost lost my freedom, almost lost my sanity many times. And I had to wrestle it down, like grabbing a steer by the horns and wrestling it down. And eventually I mastered the self. And it is a never-ending battle as long as we're here in this mortal coil. But it is one that you need to understand the concept of, because a big part of the lost generation is that there is no self-mastery. It's more common the older you go. A lot, like you hear me talk about the old timers and my dad a lot, and they had self-mastery. They were the authors of their own surroundings and destiny. Most people are just floating like driftwood down the river, lost. And it kills me, it pains me to see how many lost souls there are. And I hate going to even just to go get groceries, because I see hundreds of lost souls milling around with a 1,000-yard stare, aimlessly trudging, slow, grinding, depressing trudge down the aisles looking at what goods they need to buy. It's just sad, and it drives me nuts. And then when I look at the people that are lost, and they're partying and they're doing the drugs, and they're just throwing away their time and their health because they've lost the battle. They've lost the battle, or they don't know there's a battle going on. So what is self-mastery? Okay, so during that whole time I just described to you, I figured out who I was, where I came from, and why I did the things I did. And that's perhaps the more screwed up part of my story with addiction, is that I knew the reasons I was doing the things I was doing, and I knew the consequences, and did it anyways. And I hope that I don't have to see that with other people, but we need to help these people. And just, people in general, even that aren't on drugs, a lot of them have lost the battle. And that's why they succumb to materialism. That's why they succumb to entertainment and technology and think that that's what the world is all about. If you go back and you listen to that quote again, you'll realize that these things are all temporary, and that's not what life is all about. So you need to figure out who you are. How did you get here? What made you the person you are today? What drives you? What do you want from the future? Do you understand your past? Do you understand your family history? Do you understand enough history to know what's going on right now and why it is the way it is? And you need to be able to become comfortable in your own skin, with your own circumstances, be able to play the hand you were dealt, and developing an idea of what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are is the most important part. Because if you know your own weaknesses, you can pick a position to try to avoid those types of situations. If you know your own strengths, you know what you can marshal to create your own surroundings and destiny. So that is the key part. But you also have to be able to look critically at yourself. And this is something most people are terrible at. And it's something that I was doing all the time. And I couldn't even really tell you why. I think it's because I had external influences always pointing out all my flaws. But I began to look at them myself and figure out why I had those flaws, and which ones were flaws I had to overcome, and which flaws were just part of my identity. And there's a lot of flaws I have that I choose to keep because it's part of my identity. And it's obviously not things that are very destructive, but I am who I am, and I know who I am. And that's the first step on that spiritual warfare. You need to know who you are and be comfortable with it. Okay, elemental mastery is an idea that comes out of esoteric traditions, the tarot, alchemy, stuff like that. And really what it is just a better way of defining self-mastery, but it's more outward facing, how you interface with the world. This is the long journey from home. Okay, so elemental mastery takes the 4 traditional elements, air, water, fire, and earth, and it attributes a different plane of our way of interfacing with the world around us. Earth is the physical plane. Air is the mental plane. Water is the emotional plane. And fire is the plane of will. Okay? So you need to be able to interface in the physical world. You need to have mastery of the mind, mastery of the emotion, and be able to master your will. If you have all of that covered, you have the recipe for success. You have the recipe for being content at the very least, and being able to make things happen for yourself. And the emotional plane and the mental plane are not one and the same. And that is a big difference between men and women. Okay? A man will have to make a lot of decisions in his life where he will have to favor the reason in his mind or, principle over his feelings. Okay? And that's something that a lot of women are not good at. And I don't care what you say about, misogyny and being offended. That is the facts. That is the facts. There's always exceptions to the rule, but most women are operating emotionally, and there's a biological reason for that. Because if you're a mother, you need to operate out of that emotion to nurture and look after the needs of your children. And also that emotion gets you in touch with your intuition. And females are much more intuitive than men are. So it's not a one-sided affair here. But in all of our lives, we will have to make decisions where we forego our emotions in favor of reason, in favor of the mind. And those are the hardest decisions to make. They are. They're very difficult decisions to make, but they need to be made at times. And there's also times, and this is especially something men should listen to, there's also times where you have to forego the mind in favor of emotion. And men get caught up in pride and ego and, stubbornness. And sometimes emotion does need to win out. And the fine line is determining where that's the case. So the big example I could give is in politics. Everyone is thinking emotionally with their political decisions, and that is not a tenable position. Political decisions need to be made with reason out of the plane of the mind. You can't be emotionally backing all your political decisions. Okay? It will cause a race to the bottom. And people invest their emotions, and you will make decisions that you normally would not make out of emotion. Emotions can be manipulated. And if your principles are in check, reason and the mind cannot be manipulated. So the plane of will is how we actually take action while marshaling these other planes. And will can carry you a long way. You can be lacking in a lot of things, but if you have the will, that can carry you through a lot of the time. And one thing I can say that about off the top of my head is in a fight. You don't necessarily have to be the biggest, strongest man, most talented fighter to win a fight. They always say, who has the most heart? And there's a lot of truth to that. because that is raw willpower. So, there's an old idea of what they call fighting on death's ground. It's in Sun Tzu's Art of War. And the whole theory is if your soldiers see fighting and winning as their only choice, then they're much more likely to achieve it. And that is the plane of the will. And the will is very, very powerful. Very powerful. But the will is what actually evokes creation around us. Without the will, not much gets achieved. But this is just a basic introduction to self-mastery and elemental mastery. And it is one of the most important things I have ever come to know in life. And it applies to everything that you do, everything that you feel, everything that you want to create. And I hope that this wasn't too boring for you out there, but if you have a lot of issues, you don't know why things aren't working out for you, really think about some of the things I said in this video and think about if you're meeting that standard. Are you personally winning that battle? Are you even capable of journeying far from home? Lost will get you found.